Public Health and Welfare Committee to order. First up, we will have a hearing on House Bill 2114. And to give us a bill explanation from the Revisor's Office is Jenna Moyer. Jenna, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. House Bill 2114 establishes the Kansas Senior Care Task Force, and this bill would create a new section of law and give this task force the duty of studying a list of topics, including how senior care is provided, administration of antipsychotic medications to residents of adult care homes, safeguards to prevent abuse and neglect, adult care homes surveys and fines, and funding and implementation of the Kansas Senior Care Act. Subsection B, beginning on line 19, lists the members of the Kansas Senior Care Task Force. Originally, there were 20, and the House Committee on Children and Seniors added 2 members to that task force, one being a representative of the Alzheimer's Association and one being a consumer of Kansas Senior Services appointed by the Speaker of the silver-haired legislature. Subsection C would establish that the task force members be appointed before August 1st of this year. And then the subsections D, E, and F go into some of the more boilerplate provisions regarding establishing task force. You can note in subsection E, let's see, this would be page 3, line 21, that the House Committee of the Whole did amend a few dates in there. And this would be that the task force submission of their preliminary progress report, it was going to be January 13th, 2022, and that language was amended to be the beginning of the 2022 regular session of the legislature. And then the final report date was changed from January 11th, 2023 to the beginning of the 2023 regular session of the legislature. And just for your personal reference, I will note that task forces, although they may have members of the legislature on them, they are generally not given the full powers of a committee and therefore cannot introduce legislation. And lastly, in subsection I, this bill would provide that the provisions of the section would expire on June 30, 2023. So after the committee or the task force, has submitted their report, the duties of that committee would wrap up. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. Oh,
thank you for
and
that.
one more thing. Oops. I forgot to mention the vote of this bill. Sorry, Mr. Chair. It passed the House on a vote of 113 to 8.
Thank you. Committee, do we have any questions for Jenna? Okay. Seeing none, we will now turn our attention to proponent testimony. And first up with us virtually is Margaret Farley, the Executive Director on behalf of BOD and members. Margaret, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Margaret Farley, and I'm the Executive Director of Kansas Advocates for Better Care. We have testified on this bill before the House. We were neutral then. We are now testifying in support of House Bill 2114. We see a great need for study in regard to various issues of long-term care for older adults and for persons who are dependent on their care and disabled. We believe that there are serious issues that certainly have come to the light in the last year regarding long-term care, especially in long-term care facilities. And we look forward to participating in the committee. These issues are serious issues that affect hundreds of thousands of Kansans who need now and who will need in the future long-term supports and services and specialized healthcare services. Many older adults are at risk for financial, physical, and emotional abuse. We know that there are a couple bills going through the legislature this year, at least in regard to that, and we are pleased to see that. We certainly appreciate the efforts of the House Committee on Children and Seniors to add a representative from the Alzheimer's Association and a consumer of Kansas Senior Services appointed by the silver-haired legislature. Both of these are great additions. We still request and hope for a broader look at not just institutional focused care, which we believe this task force duties sort of lean in the direction of health, home and community-based services are critically important. And we have certainly seen the need for that in the last year. We hope that there will be an opportunity to address those issues as well in this committee. And therefore we are in support of House Bill 2114. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, we will hold questions till all proponents have had an opportunity to testify. Next up, we have Rachel Monger with Leading Age Kansas. Rachel, welcome to the committee.
There we go. That works. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, for having me this morning. I'm going to keep it short. If you didn't know that before the pandemic that we had a lot of issues in long-term care, I think you certainly do now. They are big. They're complex. If they were simple and black and white, we would have resolved them years ago. Our CEO, Deborah Zaire, told me that there was actually a legislative task force once before, but it's been decades ago now. And we are long overdue for a meaningful, solutions-based conversation around long-term care in Kansas. There are a lot of good things happening in long-term care that don't make the headlines. There are also some unpleasant truths that we don't always want to face as providers, as consumers, as taxpayers, and sometimes as policymakers as well. So a legislative task force isn't going to solve everything, but we are in desperate need of a first step. And we think that this bill would help achieve that. So thank you very much.
Rachel, thank you. Committee, next up we have Tanya Dwarf Bruner, the Executive Director of Oral Health Kansas. Tanya, welcome to the committee.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me this morning. Again, so my name is Tanya Dwarf Bruner. I'm the Executive Director at Oral Health Kansas. I'll also be brief. We think this is a great bill. We're excited about it. We didn't weigh in when it got to through the House, but we've since come on our radar, and we're excited about just the focus on the needs of older Kansans. They're significant, and I've got some details in my testimony. I won't go over those, but some details about some of the oral health related needs for older Kansans. One of the things we think just fits really well is we actually have requested, it's in the House version of the appropriations bill, we've requested that there be an interim study of oral health needs, specifically of people in the rural areas of the state and older Kansans. So I think it's just it's a great confluence of these two issues at the same time. So we hope that this task force would be able to include health and oral health in the issues that they consider. I know that was discussed in the House. So really just want to be here to say we think this is a great bill. We're excited. We think there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of good conversation, and it's going to fit well with this other study that we've requested. So I appreciate that, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Tanya, thank you for your testimony. Committee, next we have Judy Davis Cole. She is with AARP of Kansas, and she is testifying virtually. Judy, welcome to the committee. Judy, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm a victim of internet satellite, and so sometimes I get some of these delays. Sorry. On behalf of the 290,000 AARP members in Kansas, we thank you for this opportunity to testify in favor of House Bill 2114. My name is Judy Davis Cole. AARP feels that it's critical that the state establish this task force to research and consider issues important to seniors across the state, and then when indicated, recommend legislation to proactively address these issues. And AARP stands ready and committed to contribute as a member of this task force. the function of the task force will become increasingly important as the number of Americans aged 65 and over is projected to increase from the current 52 million nationwide to 95 million by the year 2060. In this same time frame, the average lifespan is projected to increase from 78.5 to 85.6, which indicates that there's going to be an increased demand for long-term services and supports. Through the results of continuing research and population surveys, AARP identifies and then advocates for issues important to seniors, such as long-term care, both in the facilities and in the home, caregiving, caregiver support, quality of life issues, financial security issues, livable communities that will allow seniors to age in place, as well as support for veterans. Also, with the rapid growth of information technology and high-tech devices that are strictly geared to seniors, it's even more important that there are appropriate safeguards and in place to protect our population. AARP partners with world-class foundations such as the SCAN Foundation, Scripps Gerontology, and others to produce some meaningful reports such as the long-term services and support scorecard and the AARP COVID-19 nursing home dashboard that's updated every 4 weeks. We've recently published The Longevity Economy, looking at the economic impact of the population 50 and above in the state of Kansas. I've included a link to this report in my written testimony, and I encourage you, if you have the time, to please look at that. I think you'll find it very impressive. We ask for your support for this bill and to support AARP as a standing member of the task force. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, next we have Jamie Gideon, Kansas Director of Public Policy for the Alzheimer's Association. Jamie, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chair Hildebrand and members of the Senate Public Health and Welfare Committee for the opportunity to testify in favor of HB 2114, establishing the Senior Care Task Force. The Alzheimer's Association views this task force as a positive step towards addressing the needs of Kansas seniors, and particularly those with dementia in Kansas. The first topic addressed in the bill is provision of care for seniors in the state of Kansas who suffer from Alzheimer's disease, dementia, or other age-related mental health conditions. In Kansas, there are 55,000 who are currently living with Alzheimer's and 85,000 unpaid caregivers who are taking care of them. These numbers will continue to grow because the greatest risk for getting dementia is aging. According to the Center for Economic Development and Business Research through Wichita State, currently we have 533 Kansans who are over the age of 65. By 2050, there'll be 857,268 Kansans over 65, which is more than a 61% increase. I ask for your support of HB 2114, which will help address the needs of our aging population. Thank you, and I'll take questions at the appropriate time.
Jamie, thank you for your testimony. Committee, that does conclude our proponent testimony. We do not have any written testimony. Do we have any questions for any of the proponents? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so my question is for Rachel Monger. Rachel. Hey, Rachel. Good to see you. You know, I'm always a little bit, I mean, I do think that, you know, we need to continue to look more at what we're doing for seniors, especially since I'm in that population. But how does this, or do you see this as being an enhancement of what the Bob Bethel Oversight Committee already does?
I do. The reason being that a lot of these issues I said that are just these huge complex issues, we tend to just kind of discuss or even sometimes battle it out, you know, 1, 2, 3 minutes at a time. and which is fine. But I think that a task force gives us the time to actually discuss things, and not everything's so straightforward. So
I would say that I would agree with you on the battling out 1, 2, 3 minutes at a time issue as well. It was mentioned by, I think, may I follow up, Mr. Chairman? It was mentioned by, I think it was Margaret Farley, about the fact that, and as I look at the bill and the topics, home and community-based services are not specifically listed on there. So I would ask you, with Leading the Age of Kansas, do you see a reason why that shouldn't be included in the list?
I don't know there's a reason it should not be. I think HCBS encompasses a whole other world that goes far beyond, aging or long-term care. So there's that part of it. I think a lot of times that what we don't talk about with HCBS and seniors is the idea of rebalancing, which could be part of that task force discussion, which has happened in a lot of states. Kansas has struggled to rebalance between institutional care and HCBS. That's the term they use for getting people out of institutions or keeping them in there longer. I think that would be a really worthwhile conversation to have with that task force.
Thank you.
Do we have any further questions? Senator Stephan.
Thank you, Chairman. And this might go to Ms. Farley. There are several references to issues in long-term care facilities, and I know early on in the virus response, I had lots of calls from the nursing homes, and they were just overwhelmed with the voluminous regulations that they basically face on a day-to-day basis. Can you help me understand a little better? Obviously these are great questions are brought up, great opportunities, but help me understand how this all can't be accomplished in the existing structure of government we have already. Thank you.
Margaret, are you with us to answer that question?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Trying to. There, can you hear me now? So sorry, that took me a while to unmute. I beg your pardon.
We can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. These issues have been before the legislature many, many times. And as Rachel said, many times they're dealt with rather bill by bill, as opposed to a more comprehensive look at it. Although there have been some task force in recent years on Alzheimer's and on various other issues. This opportunity to come together and to look at these issues more comprehensively. I have been personally dealing with issues of long-term care and the quality of long-term care for at least 30 some years. From time to time, there are studies. This study may not help unless it has authority and teeth and an opportunity for full discussion. But it's certainly, these issues are issues that need a comprehensive solution. We're not going to accomplish everything overnight. But unless it's sort of like looking at the old barn and trying to clean up that old barn. You can't do everything at once, but unless you get a plan to do that, you are going to keep making the same mistakes. And certainly COVID-19 in 2020 did present what some of the issues are that, as Rachel indicated, have been going on for a very long time. So I think there are many things that can be gained from a discussion such as this. And I personally just don't see why we wouldn't do that, since we know the population is increasing and care needs will increase. And we're going to be looking at this on a bill by bill basis, probably even still, but it would be helpful to have a bit more of a master plan along these lines. Thank you.
Margaret, thank you for that. Any further questions? I've got kind of a generic question, and I don't know who would be the best one to answer this, but through the COVID crisis, we have heard, at least I have heard several times, that the risk for senior care facilities closing has escalated. Some numbers I've heard up to almost 50% of our Kansas adult care homes are at risk of closing. Would this bill, what would this bill do to address that? And if, unfortunately, there is no place in Kansas for those elderly citizens to go in Kansas, what are the options for them after that? And that's open to anybody. If no one has an answer, that's fine.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Margaret, go ahead.
Thank you. That is a key question, and I think you're wise to bring that up. There have to be, we used to call home and community-based services alternatives to nursing home care, and that is really how it developed. Home and community-based services have never been on the same equal standing as institutional services in terms of what we fund in this state. And as was mentioned earlier, most of the home and community-based services are provided by unpaid workers, usually family members, neighbors, etc. So I would say that yes, it's an issue that some facilities may no longer be able to operate. We have to look at what people want, particularly after COVID, and how people were locked in facilities. That was not pleasant for anyone, certainly not for the resident. It was disastrous. And so I'm just going to say that home and community-based services is not something that we can do without, precisely because of the question you're raising. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Margaret, thank you. And Rachel, I saw you stand up. So.
Thank you so much. And, you know, a big part of that is the lower occupancy plus all the lots of expenses from COVID-19 that will carry forward. We do, of course, have our enhanced funding request to help with that in this fiscal year and the coming fiscal year. So we'll hope you consider that. A lot of the homes that are at risk are at risk post and pre-pandemic, and that's a lot of rural areas. And so it's not a simple answer to just say, well, then we just go to home and community-based services, because that's a very complex issue in our rural areas. And it's also not the best answer for everyone that's out there. And so we'll continue to talk about our enhanced funding requests for this year and next. And then part of that task force, likely funding and how we fund things will probably come up a lot in all of the discussions, because it goes behind so many things like staffing or keeping your doors open, things like that.
Rachel, thank you. Committee, this does conclude our testimony and questions for House Bill 2114. Unless there's somebody else wanting to testify as a proponent, opponent, or neutral, not seeing any, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2114. Committee, we will now turn our attention to House Bill 2151. And here with the revisor's staff to give us a bill explanation is Jenna Moyer. Jenna?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning again, committee. House Bill 2151 would create the Kansas Elder and Dependent Adult Abuse Multidisciplinary Teams and a coordinator, and that title is a bit of a mouthful, but generally what this bill would do, it would require the Attorney General to appoint this we're just going to call it a team coordinator and additional staff as appropriations would allow. The coordinator would facilitate the creations of teams within each judicial district, and those teams would be comprised of the either this person or the coordinator, the sheriff of each county, the county and district attorney of each county, the secretaries of DCF and KDADs, as well as the state long-term care ombudsman. And additionally, these teams may also include the following individuals. So that first subsection B is that those 5 individuals are required or shall be on the teams. And then 2 would be they may also include representatives from law enforcement, not included above, medical provider, legal services provider, a housing provider, or representative of elder or a dependent adult housing facilities, a coroner or medical examiner, a representative of financial services or banking industry, and any other individual deemed necessary by the team. And this team would be responsible to coordinate investigations of elder and dependent adult abuse and identify opportunities within those jurisdictions that would improve policies and procedures, either in the way that adult abuse, neglect, and exploitation is notified or responded to within the limits of their local resources. And these teams would be required to meet at least quarterly, and they could also enter into memorandums of understanding with any governmental agency or private entity that's deemed necessary. And you will note on page 2, subsection E, this begins on line 12, that any documents, materials, or other information obtained by the committee would be kept confidential and not subject to the Open Records Act. And in there, we also put the typical language that this exception to the Open Records Act would expire in 5 years. So in this case, it would be July 1st, 2026, unless the legislature reviews and reenacts this provision. And subsection F would provide that the meetings conducted pursuant to this section would not be subject to the Kansas Open Meetings Act. Section 2 of this bill amends KSA 75-723, which is the statute governing the abuse, neglect, and exploited persons unit within the Attorney General's office. And the only amendment in this section would be on page 3. This would be line 7, that would allow this the abuse, neglected, and exploited persons unit to assist in the investigation or discussion of any elder and dependent adult abuse multidisciplinary teams pursuant to section 1. And this bill passed the House on a vote of, looks like 121 to 8. Oh, no, sorry, that should be 121 to 0. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that explanation. Committee, do we have any questions for Jenna? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jenna, so I think you just answered my question, but in section 2 of KSA 75-723, the reason why I see, so you have listed all the, or the bill has listed all the sections of that of the Attorney General's area. Is that why I see number 5 and number 6 referring to child abuse listed there? Is because those are just all listed with the addition of the new area, number 8?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The reason why this existing law was already added was just to add that reference to the teams created in section 1. And so the existing abuse, neglect, and exploitation of persons unit does more than just senior and elder abuse. What's listed in 4 or 5, what's already listed there is current law that would not be affected by this.
Thank you.
Committee, seeing no further questions. Jenna, thank you. We will now move our attention to proponent testimony. First up is Stephen Carr, the Deputy Attorney General. He is with us virtually. Oh, no, he is here. Wow, that's virtual. I tell you what, that's almost augmented reality there. So, Stephen Carr is with us in person. Stephen, welcome to the committee.
Thank you very much, Chairman and fellow members. So first, a little bit about the origin of this bill. As indicated, I am the deputy in charge of the Fraud and Abuse Litigation Division. One of our primary focuses is investigating and prosecuting criminal violations of the Mistreatment Act. As part of that, I've been a prosecutor now 20 years, and a good portion of my career has been spent on elder abuse. Because of that, one of the things that was done recently in 2019 was the general pursuant to the A&E Act under 75-723 created the elder and dependent adult, and it's key to remember that it's both of those. It's not just elders, but also individuals who might suffer from developmental disabilities or other disabilities. It is the Elder and Dependent Adult Abuse Prevention Council. That's a mouthful, but I think I got it right. I am the chairman of that council. That council consists of multiple agencies and individuals. There's a law enforcement representative on there. There is 2 prosecutors, one from a large jurisdiction, one from a small jurisdiction. KDHE, KDADS, and DCF are all represented on that committee as well. You might reference that almost as a statewide multidisciplinary team. Now, the role of that council is not on specific cases, but on the larger issues related to elder and dependent adult abuse. It's out of that council that one of the things we recognize was the need for multidisciplinary teams. There are existing 2 kind of multidisciplinary teams existing currently. One is in Johnson County called the FAST, as related to elder and dependent adults. One is called the FAST team in Johnson County. They primarily deal with financial crimes, but also physical and abuse as well. They are limited, though, because of current statute. They don't necessarily have members from the community, such as doctors or financial and people from the financial industry. You also have one in Sedgwick County, which is essentially the same type of multidisciplinary team. What I want to talk to you about, you have my written testimony, but 2 of the things are, one, the importance of multidisciplinary teams and what that really means. So specifically, this statute is, again, dealing with the investigation of individual cases. So yes, they have the ability to make recommendations in general about the issues related to elder and dependent abuse, but their main function is actually investigating or assisting in the investigation of individual cases. Why is that necessary? Well, I'm guessing none of you members became a senator because you wanted to discuss multidisciplinary teams in a bill, but here you are. And what do? You invite individuals who at least hopefully know something about the issue to come and speak to you. That's really what a multidisciplinary team is. I can assure you, I did not end up going to law school and becoming a prosecutor because I wanted to practice probate law or do math. Yes, I'm married to a math teacher, but that's about it. Both of those are important skills when it comes to investigating and prosecuting elder abuse. So when it comes to things like power of attorneys, guardianships, conservatorships, trusts, I have to rely on somebody who knows those things in and out. One of the crimes under the Mistreatment of a Dependent or Elder Adult Act is a violation of those acts and then obtaining the money for your own purpose. Well, how do I know if it's a violation of that act? Because someone tells me so, generally speaking. And so those are complicated issues. The other thing that is unique about elder and dependent adult abuse cases, and I think is key to keep in mind, is that there is multiple agencies often involved in the investigations of these cases. Unlike, say, just a typical theft. In a typical theft case, you would have the local police department investigating that. Here, what you would have is if it was a mistreatment of elder or dependent, most likely that initial call would come through the DCF hotline or the KDAD's hotline. There's a civil component, an investigation on the civil side that is conducted by those agencies, which oftentimes, unfortunately, is parallel to the criminal investigation, meaning those two never meet or discuss. That's problematic because, one, it results in duplication oftentimes of obtaining evidence or not obtaining evidence. And secondly, it oftentimes creates, there's different powers given to those agencies. In other words, law enforcement has the ability to conduct a search warrant, DCF doesn't, right? DCF might have subpoena power, law enforcement may not have the direct power, that may lie with the prosecutor. So it's important that you have coordination of these. Shocker, I'll cut to the chase, those don't communicate very well. We call it siloing, right? So you have DCF or KDADs in their silo, and you have law enforcement and the prosecution in their silos. It is important, it is absolutely crucial to these cases that those entities communicate. One last thing, this is not, while it is new to this area in Kansas, this is not new nationwide. These exist in quite a few states, and we based our legislation on review of those states, and not only reviewing the statutes in those states, but communicating with individuals in those states to determine how their statutes worked or didn't work. Secondly, it's not new to Kansas, the idea of multidisciplinary teams. These do exist in relation to child cases. Because again, just in those cases, you have multiple agencies and oftentimes very complicated issues. Those exist in Chapter 38, but the difference here is, in those cases, they are either initiated by the court or they are initiated through the child advocacy centers. We don't necessarily have an equivalent to child advocacy centers on the adult side, so that's why we created the statewide coordinator. It's important, somebody has to help get these off the ground. And to the extent that they have not gotten off the ground yet, I can assure you that is a monumental task of bringing these entities together. And so that's the reason for this legislation, and I'll stand for questions if you have any.
Stephen, thank you for your testimony. In committee, we will hold until all proponents have had an opportunity to testify. We still do have two more proponents. Committee, I am still trying to work through a couple of bills today, these bills that we heard today and the one we heard yesterday. Time allowing, if our conferees are quick enough, we will get to those. If not, we will put it off till tomorrow. So next up is Steve Geiber, Executive Director for the Kcdd. Steve, welcome to the committee.
Hi, I'm Stephen Gabar, the Executive Director for the Kansas Council on Developmental Disabilities. And the council's made up of self-advocates, state agencies, family members, and our role is to advise policy members on issues impacting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And our primary role is to do advocacy, capacity building, and affect systems change. The council really supports 2151. We really believe this is a critical bill and a critical piece of tool that we need out there. Every 5 years, the council does a comprehensive review and analysis of issues that affect people with developmental disabilities, and abuse, neglect, and exploitation comes up very high all the time. And so this is an area that we really need to make some progress on. National data shows that people with disabilities are about 7 times more likely to be victims of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. And our current legal system a lot of times doesn't really recognize people with disabilities as credible witnesses. I think this local team will really go a long way in making progress on that. I have had an opportunity, Steve and I visited yesterday, about making our resources at the council available to this team to work with folks with disabilities to make sure that this is an effective and successful program. They were more than willing to invite us in and bring our expertise to them. And so I'll really cut to the chase on this. We really believe this is a great piece of legislation. We want to see it happen, and we're really looking forward to being a part of it.
Steve, thank you for your testimony. Committee, now we'll turn our attention to Margaret Farley. She's the Executive Director on behalf of the BOD and members. Margaret, welcome back.
Thank you, Chair Hildebrand and members of the committee. We appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 2151, creating elder independent adult multidisciplinary teams for investigating incidents of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. How many elder adults are abused across America? For all types of abuse, neglect, and exploitation, approximately 1 in 10 Americans aged 60 and plus have been subjected to some form of elder abuse. Some estimates range as high as 5 million elders who are abused. One study estimated that 1 in 14 cases of abuse are reported by authorities. By far, most residents in Kansas adult care homes die without a physician visit or coroner's investigation, and some of their deaths may have been of questionable causes, which could be suggested by a simple record review. We know that older adults who sustain falls resulting in head injuries are at greater risk for brain bleeds and blood clots causing disability or death. Also, older adults who suffer hip fractures have a significantly higher risk of death within 1 year. For women, that's 33%. For men, that's 25. Or reverse that. For men, it's 31 in 3. For women, it's 1 in 4. Understaffing in nursing homes often leads to neglect, and neglect often leads to falls, which can result in preventable head injuries and hip fractures. This type of institutional neglect is almost never investigated as neglect. We hope that local MDTs will be able to sort out instances of neglect in adult care homes. And sometimes that's as simple as looking at screening death certificates and medical records for residents. Sadly, also rapes actually do occur in adult care homes, but often evidence is destroyed, bed sheets are laundered, the victim is bathed. There are also sometimes inexcusable delays in seeking hospital treatment in cases of suspected rapes in adult care homes, causing the lack of rape kits. As the population increases in age, the incidence of A&E are going to increase. One thing we hope to see is more focus on victim recovery and treatment of victims who have suffered at the hands of an abuser. These MDTs have been tried for a while. We hope that this will be successful, and that is why we support it. We would like to see that the documents, materials, and information obtained or discussed in the MDTs, all of that is not going to be subject to Kansas Open Records Act, and we would like to see some of the information, certainly not case specific, but when the information goes to incidents and proposals for best practices in this arena. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Margaret, thank you very much for your testimony. Committee, do we have any questions for any of the conferees? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my questions are for Deputy Attorney General Steve Thanks.
CAR, just
Thanks for
German.
being here. I do have a few questions about the legislation. For one thing, this bill does have a fiscal note. Would you like to speak to that fiscal note, please?
Yes. So it does have a fiscal note, and I was asked about that in the House, and what I would indicate is, again, the reasoning for that is the one person, the statewide coordinator, to assist each judicial district in convening and organizing the MDT so it works as intended. I can assure you, based on our review of other states and also just our understanding of the issue as a council, we understood that, one, these probably will not get off the ground if you don't have some initiating trigger mechanism. So in the child side, that was the child advocacy centers. They were mandated to do that. Again, you don't have that here. The other thing is that in the states that we discussed or talked to, one of the things was just getting the MDT up and running and understanding how it should work and the resources that could be available to it were a task in of itself. And if you don't have some coordinating entity to help with that, what'll probably happen is they'll meet once or twice and then it'll simply fizzle out because they don't have the capability of, for instance, finding a physician that's willing to come and volunteer their time for the MDT, because nobody on these MDTs are going to get paid or even their travel reimbursed. So what you're talking about is you're going to have somebody that can convince individuals to come and volunteer their time. That really takes a champion to initiate that and to do that for all judicial districts. So that's really what the 100,000 that would be expending here would be for that exclusive purpose.
And that is annually, and that is, I do have a series of questions. And that is annually, and that is for 5 years because this doesn't sunset for 5 years.
Correct.
But I do question the fact that somebody, a person, is going to know better than those people within that judicial district about who might fit into those categories you just talked about. And the other part is that we have, Department of Children and Family, Department of Aging and Disabilities, the sheriff, the county district attorney. We've had in those judicial districts that are going to be on these councils, and they, as you just said, there's no financial, actually, the big financial cost is falling on our local judicial councils and our local judicial districts on those different areas of that work within them.
Yes. So two things if I may, to respond to that. One, those costs on the law enforcement and those social service agencies already exist. I mean, they're having to investigate. So to some extent, having these MDTs will actually, in many ways, make them more efficient and allow for them to obtain more resources that they are not capable of affording currently, right, because of the volunteer nature of it. Secondly, it is true, I don't think that the intent is not that the statewide coordinator would be necessarily picking the individuals who serve on that. That's why there's the mandatory members, and then there's the may members, so to speak. But what they would do is be bringing to them the knowledge of how to create or how to organize the MDT, assess cases, and process those cases in an efficient manner. I don't think that is something that currently exists within those agencies. The other thing is we actually looked at possibly having, say, DCF do this job. Immediately what they responded is, this would be a full-time job and we don't have somebody we can donate the resources to do this statewide, or even on a local, each jurisdictional basis. Law enforcement, we have law enforcement representative, they indicated the same thing. And so I think the reality is, I don't know that those agencies would have the resources to establish and do the lift that is necessary to get these going. I can't stress enough how much organization and logistical task it is to get one of these operating properly.
Follow-ups to that. So you said that Johnson County has a FAST team. You referred to them that they were limited by statute. Well, how are they limited by statute right now?
So they do not, because there's not confidentiality requirements and they don't believe they could invite, say, a doctor to come in and review an individual case and/or say a financial person. My understanding is, I think as a council, we believe that there could be some legal issues regarding that and confidentiality. So, and when we looked at other states, that was one of their concerns as well, and why they included those confidentiality requirements and the COMA and CORA requirements that we contained in this bill.
Well, I'm not opposed to the concept. I do think our judicial districts have a lot on their plate already, but I'm not opposed to the concept, but I am very concerned about additional funding that's going to be involved with this, which is going to be over $100,000 every year.
Senator Stephan.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'll impose upon Ms. Farley again. There were statements again about the nursing homes, falls, fractured hips. As a physician and anesthesiologist, I've provided anesthesia for countless hip fractures. And I learned after a period of time that they really wasn't about the broken bone, it was about the failing body, the failing system, basically a multi-system failure. There's people in nursing homes are elderly, they're frail, they do pass away. Help me grow more comfortable that the champions, the unpaid champions on these councils aren't going to come into nursing homes and make things more difficult for the nursing homes by, and again, how is this council, again, it seems to really appear to be government growth. Help me understand all that and help me understand how we're going to contain and continue respect for family wishes as to how folks are taken care of in nursing homes. Thank you.
Margaret, you are muted.
Sorry about that. I apologize. Thank you, Senator, for the question. I could write a book on that question. It is a complex issue, but I have to say that you raise many issues that certainly are directed to the perspective of the people who work in nursing homes and who do sometimes excellent work, and it can be extraordinarily difficult work. They often are working understaffed. If an individual is neglected in a nursing facility, we have come to believe that as a society, that is basically business as usual. This used to be the same question with bed sores in nursing facilities, that it was business as usual. Finally, emergency rooms in hospitals started reporting these and saying, no, this does not meet the standard of care. We have to look at each individual situation, and I'm certainly not suggesting that a team come in and run over the hardworking staff in facilities. I am saying that sometimes it is appropriate to have an investigation into whether or not that was an incident of neglect. And it's not just fractures, and it's not just family members who say we want, we want this person to go to surgery or we don't. So long as the individual can say what has happened to them and what they want done, it of course is in their purview to seek treatment or not seek treatment. But we have, as we have seen, an epidemic of abuse and neglect due to understaffing in this country and in this state. And yes, I am sympathetic to the hard work of nurse aides and nurses in facilities. I would ask them to look up the line of authority within the corporations and try to get the resources that they need to have sufficient staff, because I totally understand that it is devastating when you don't have enough people in the facility to do what's necessary to keep residents safe. And after all, that is the key reason that we have long-term care in this country and long-term care facilities. Many people can't take care of themselves, and they go to a nursing home or they seek long-term supports and services because they can't do that. They need help, and we need that help to be safe. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Committee, not seeing any more questions. We will now close the proponent, or move on from our proponent testimony. I would draw your attention to written only. We do have 6. There are no other proponents or no opponent testimony or neutral. Is there anybody wishing to testify on either of those? Not seeing any, we will close our hearing on House Bill 2151. Committee, just kind of give you an update of where we are at. We are out of time. I was hoping these would be fairly quick bills and that we could work bills today. We have, from here till Friday, we have 2 bills a day. If things go smoothly, we might be able to work bills that we've previously heard. Monday, we have confirmation hearings. Those could be short, they might not. The only other day we have allotted to us is Tuesday, and it's already extending out. At the rate we are going, we might not be able to get all of our work done. So I'm just giving you guys a heads up. We might have to prioritize bills of what we're going to work, and some of these bills that we're having hearings on that I was hoping to work will not get worked. So just giving you a heads up. I was hoping we'd get some work done today. It's not going to happen. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.